All right, calling the meeting to order at 3 o'clock. Moment of reflection pledge by Trustee Murphy.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call, Sam?
Trustee Soilu?
Here?
Trustee Murphy?
Here.
Trustee Pearson?
Here.
Trustee McElroy?
Here.
Trustee Anderson?
Here.
Trustee Crane?
Here.
Trustee Wiegand?
Here.
Dr. Smith?
Here.
Great. Now we'll move to adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Trustee Anderson, second by Trustee Crane. Roll call vote?
Trustee Soilu?
Yes?
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee McElroy?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand?
Yes.
Great. Unanimous. Is there any community input? No? There is no community input. Then we can begin the strategic plan board update at 3:02. And Superintendent, did you want to introduce them?
Yeah, we welcome our great friends, Sandy and Carolyn, F3, but I don't know who you represent when you do this, just everybody and all-inclusive. But they've been working with us all year on our strategic planning process that really started before the school year, kind of setting up how we could engage our community in meaningful conversations around a strategic direction. And so they've helped facilitate that. You'll remember that we had multiple days at the beginning of the year in the fall with roughly 150 or so constituents representing a diverse set of constituent groups. And then throughout, we've had our board study session, then we've gone back to our constituents through advisory meetings, all the while trying to revise what you have in front of you today for your second study session and consideration. We're really excited about the progress we've made. So without further ado, Carolyn and Sandy, thank you very much for being here.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Good to see all of you again. We are delighted to be here. And our goal today, we have myself, Sandy, Carolyn, and we do have Amani Jones with us today. And I don't know that you've all met her. She was with us at the two committee input sessions and has been working with us on the document and working behind the scenes through all of this. So we're actually really happy to have her here. She's going to talk about the student engagement when we get to that portion because she was really involved in that piece of the committee work. So our goal today is really to just talk a little bit about the documents that we've created. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the process again, just reminding everybody of where we've been. But we spent a lot of time with you all on that at the last meeting. And really to get your input yet again as you think about this moving forward. And so it's been a really rich process. I think, as we worked with other districts, one of the things we realized, there's no perfect document. It's kind of like when you redecorate and you're like, oh, I should have bought the other couch. There's always that element of what do we swap out? What do we change? It's really important today that as you go through this document, you're really thinking about at a high level, does this represent what you really feel as a community? This is a vision. It's not a plan. And we'll talk about that in a little while, but we want to really remind you of that. You're not going to hear from us what the action steps will be. That's the staff's work. But so it's really important that we just really think at that high level as we work through this. And we're going to talk. We're a tag team operation here, so I will defer to Carolyn anytime she wants to ring in.
Keep going there.
All right.
Just doing beautiful.
By the way, so the trustees know
Yes.
you have the draft
Thank you. I
document
was gonna
with
say
more of the text at the dais with you. So as they're going through their PowerPoint, it will refer to the large buckets. The content is in front of you, though.
And we'll refer you to that when we get to those slides. So just a reminder of why you've even engaged in this process. I used to always say to our board, if everything's important, nothing's important. And the reality is, it is all important. and it is all the work that we do all the time. But the challenge for any board and for staff is to bubble up those things that if we could do nothing else this year but these 3 things that would move the needle for kids, would improve outcomes for our students, what would those things be? And so we're not going to ask you to narrow it down to 3, but we want you to really think about what those top level pieces look like. A strategic plan should not be a checklist. It's a long-term or strategic vision, a long-term vision over time. And that doesn't mean it doesn't change. And so that's another piece for the board as you go through this process over years, is to ensure that your focus is where it needs to be based on the context that you're in at the time. It's forward-looking. We had some, as we go through the document, you'll hear we had a lot of folks with input around that to really not be thinking about the way it's always been, but what do we want to be? And really thinking about where are the places for us to have a do different, to have a pivot, to look at something a little bit differently. It's a guiding document. And you have your LCAP, right? We know that. That's a really important document that guides staff work. And it's not sticky. It's not a good message. It's not inspirational. People don't necessarily get up and say, can't wait to, no offense, Zakaro, but I don't get today to get excited about the LCAP. What you want to do with your strategic vision is really keep people focused again, forward thinking, long-term, with those ideas that people can grab onto. And then it should be inclusive. There should be things in there that resonate with your whole community. Not every piece will, and it should be something that all can connect to.
Thank you very much. I just want to elaborate before we go into the timeline briefly. The point Sandy said about being nimble, it may change. Certainly 2020, any long-term plan we had in place faced change. And we were reflecting as we prepared for today's meeting, had we done this work for you 2 or 3 years ago, I don't know that we really would have heard from your community as robustly as we did, if at all, about AI. And so we do need to keep our ears to the ground and our eyes on the horizon, if that's physically possible. And so I'm just going to move quickly through the timeline. As you recall, we met first here in this room last June, nearly a year ago, where we heard from the board, yes, do proceed, gather community input to guide the creation of a portrait of a graduate, and also the key themes of interest that you really hoped we would inquire about when we met with your community groups. We began with the board, then moved into that visioning and planning session. Again, the word plan, I say as a former trustee, don't, to all of you with deference, don't look for the plan. The plan will be built based on the vision that's set forward from this. We met then again in a special board meeting that I believe I was unable to attend. I was here with you virtually. My daughter had a boy. Yay. I'm doing my part for ADA, Socorro. And then we began, following that, to revise the document from the points you added, bubble up, what were the priorities, the consensus of the board. And we took that to the full committee for the members' input with 2 guiding questions, which we'll walk you through. So they saw those vision documents and were able to answer a couple of questions for us. Did your voice come through, and is anything missing? And we're going to walk you through that detail. And here we are today now, May, reviewing these draft vision documents with you. Does this set forth for this body the direction you want to move in? And then from that cascades into direction for staff to put the detail on it, the how. So briefly, the engagement process was the full school community, and that's so internal shareholders, audiences. And I have a marketing background, and sometimes I use corporate language, and I get scolded for it, but frankly, I find it a lot easier than special ed acronyms anyway. So if I slip, I apologize to you. We began with that community engagement, and that was 2 days in November, very long days, the first one very long. I would like to share with you, I've done this in many districts. I watched it as the board member in my own district. The people who participated were very engaged. They were talking, they were listening, they were challenging one another. And I will also say, probably comes as no surprise to all of you, that your students were vocal and strong. and listened to. And their voices come through very clearly here. We asked Imani, our USC graduate, to keep a particularly close eye on the questions asked and the responses we were receiving from the students. And she did a wonderful job for you. So we list here, and I will not read for you, the groups that were involved. You as well had not only internal and families, caregivers, but also city and community leaders who brought in their voice and were very, I felt, very reflective of what we're looking for in tomorrow's graduates, today's graduates, tomorrow's graduates. And so again, I will not read this to you. I think the detail is here, but the ongoing committee input is important for us to know as a board, because that is our job, right? One of our critical priorities outlined in law is to bring in the voice of the community, the local, to our schools. So they did receive a summary and links to your December discussion. We're invited to comment on that. They received a friendly reminder that they had opportunity to review the final draft. And we did hear from 20 people who gave us quite a bit of input on that draft. We'll walk you through that. So it's just a pictorial guide to 2 days in the Newport-Mesa District with quite a number of people. Would you like to join us, Imani? I wanted her to share with you some of her observations of your student engagement. But if you just look at these sticky papers around the room, you can see just through color and the tremendous detail on these papers how much work this group did for you, really. And very, very committed to bringing in their voice and talking about your schools. I do want Imani to share with you about students, but between the first and second day, we asked everyone to leave, reflect, and come back. And I want to share, where'd you go, Sandy? You ditched me. I just wanted to share with you that when they returned on the second day, Sandy did ask, as you've reflected on this, is there anything in particular you'd like to share? And there were a few who stood up, many nods as they spoke. One gentleman who did say, I've been reflecting on the influence that technology is going to have on our lives. I don't want technology to take over instruction or take over schools, but AI, I hope the writing is on, he said, the writing is on the wall, and I hope you're reading it. So, and there were nods. So there was a great reflection in between those meetings. And I just share that with you because we are profoundly responsible for bringing in that community voice. And I'm going to let Imani address you, if you please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. I'll speak briefly to the perspective of student voice. My colleagues have far more experience in this area than I do, but I was a student less than 10 years ago. So we felt strongly that their perspectives and their voice needed to guide this work. So we made sure they had an actual seat at the table. We provided panel space for them. They showed up. They didn't hold back. They were open, vocal, and most importantly, honest. Across every school and every conversation, one theme remained consistent, and that was, please see me, know me. And that plea, it isn't unique to a single student or school. It's universal to the student experience here at Newport-Mesa, and we wanted that to remain in the conversation as you move forward in this work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're going to take a minute and look at key takeaways from each of the groups, both the committee input for those 2-day sessions and then your input. As Imani just said, being seen by name and need was a really profound theme, and the students felt that strongly. And it's something that the board has, you'll see how much alignment there is in what the board said to us as well. High expectations, consistent course offerings, opportunities for all students, all schools. And these students represented the breadth and depth of your district and had different lived experiences in high school as well, so that was really important. They want us to think about integrating life readiness and digital literacy skills into learning. You know, financial literacy is on the horizon, or is happening for you all now. We have things that we know we need to put in there, but it's really important to note. And as a former superintendent, I heard this from students. I've heard it for the last 15 years, really. This idea of being adult ready. And so something that came through from your students in particular, but also from the parents and staff in the room. And then allocating resources based on students' needs. Equal is inequitable, and that came across from all community partners, student partners, parent partners that were in the room.
Excuse me, I just want to say,
Yep.
in particular, your staff.
Yep.
The employees of the organization were bubbling up on their own, that we don't need things to look the same. We need resources to be allocated in accordance with where they're needed. And that was a very strong staff.
Strong sentiment, yes. And then that they really did want character traits to develop a well-rounded graduate. And so we have the graduate, the portrait of a graduate, and we'll talk about what that looks like and how it could be used in the future. So that was from the committee. From the board, we got to meet with you and do the spend a dot and let you kind of grapple with the input that we'd received and respond to it. You also talked about high academic expectations, the consistent course offerings, opportunities for all students, all schools. You wanted meaningful learning opportunities. You also talked about life readiness, and you reinforced that. And if you remember, you had an opportunity to add anything that you didn't see in the input that we received, as well as reinforce what we were bringing to you. And you also reinforced the digital literacy skills. You also talked about resources being allocated based on needs, and you identified, which also came up very loudly and clearly in the committee input session as well, having these school identities so that students and families want to stay in their home schools. And so really thinking thoughtfully about how those things are being allocated across the district.
Yeah, I just want to speak to consistent course offerings. Specifically, what we were hearing was, I don't want to have to leave a neighborhood school to go somewhere else to receive something that I wish was available in my school. In very common language, that is what we heard. What we heard from this board was pride in school. I believe you used the word zones, but that's a rather antiseptic word if we're going to build a pride campaign. But we did hear that, and we heard that as well from families and
Yes.
caregivers, that they love their schools and they want people to know how remarkable they are. They didn't tell us how to do it. They just said they'd like to see that pride built up. Pride and the course offerings were the themes that came up around zones and schools.
So I think this one's you.
So when we, that just means you don't know what to say, so you kicked it to me.
I'm a superintendent.
Keeping it light.
To the board.
Keeping it light. So when we pushed out in April a letter to all members of the community committees, the over 100 people who participated, we did ask these questions. And we did receive a response from about 24% of those. The checks indicate to you where we got, as a group, strong marks. This came through. This was really important. Digital education for students, felt it was addressed very appropriately. Community, and this is interesting, community and civic responsibility specific to creating those strong neighborhood schools. So they don't just see the courses that are offered, but engaging those actual communities in building that. They see it as also a civic lesson as well, which I thought was very important. I heard that from the board, maybe not stated the same way. Rigorous academics for all students, meeting students where they're at and making sure wherever they want to go when they leave us, if they knock on the door, there's a good shot at that door opening for them. That's what parents want for their kiddos. That's what the kids want. The pluses indicate what we added based on their input. Of course, there were nuances, but these were specific adds: safe, welcoming, accessible, and well-maintained facilities. There was a call out for that and a call out to address the fundraising gap between school sites and school communities. Those were literal call outs. I do want to share with you that there were also some points made that we've kept all of this to inform your staff as they move forward with their build out, that belong more in the plan, not the strategy, not the what. For example, there were some specific call-outs for career and training and life skills that don't necessarily belong in here, but they should be considered as you build that out. For example, financial. Did I do something wrong?
No.
We don't have it on slideshow, so we're very transparent. You can see our notes, you can see where we've been, where we're going.
My granddaughter's
It might be
haiku
better to see the
poetry.
whole slide. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I couldn't make them out.
It's good to have a team. Special education, somebody had a couple of staff members had said, we want to see you call out special education. We did not call out any specific student group. You would look for that in your action plan. And I just want to point out one other that came through, and that was a desire to see parents included in digital education and digital literacy. As you're taking their children on this journey, would you bring them along? Again, that belongs in your plan, but those were noted. And we shift now to Portrait of a Graduate, which was really exciting work. And I just want to say, as board members, we know one of the most exciting and rewarding things we get to do is attend graduation. It is in the draft document with all detail is in your packet. But one of the most exciting things we get to do, of course, is attend graduation and hand a student a diploma and shake their hand. And what do you want to see? And what do parents want to see, and families and caregivers? And what do the students want to see in themselves? And these business leaders and higher ed leaders who participated in this discussion, what do we want to see in them? How do we build these competencies in their personal skills? And this is it. So the detail is there for you in a separate document. We didn't put it all on this slide. A lot of discussion around this, a lot of discussion. This was one area in community response to the draft documents where there was no input other than thank you. That was it. So they felt like their voice came through. And now we move into what are the key areas of focus. And I'm going to let Sandy walk you through these briefly. Again, you have all the detail in front of you. And the Portrait of a Graduate, the language that articulates what we see in each of these buckets, is here for your review and input.
So you have this in front of you, and just a reminder that this isn't an action plan, this is a vision. And again, it will change over time, but this is something that really bubbled up for your community. So they really wanted that expectations, rigor, and relevance across. And you heard the relevance piece also. We talked about that idea, am I adult ready? So we have a couple of bullets that we called out. Rigorous college preparatory course offerings consistently across all schools. Digital literacy and responsible use of innovative technology. Notice in the Portrait of a Graduate that we called it Tech Navigators. And so we really looked through all the language that we heard. It wasn't just about literacy. It was about use. It was about agency, right? So we really felt that was important to really concretely name in the Portrait of a Graduate. And here we married those two ideas up. Responsibility. And then extracurricular opportunities. That came through loud and clear as something, again, to have a focus on as you think about academics and co-curricular and extracurricular activities kind of all bundled together. How are we doing that with a vision for that across the district? Do you want to do the next one, Amy?
And so that is what we do. We teach children. It's at the heart of our work. How we do it, what we heard from the students, and with complete agreement from the adults in the room as well, not that they aren't adults, they're young adults, but from our students. Please see me, just see me. I feel like someone knows me, and I think Socorro and I have discussed this so many times in our career together. When you see me and I know that you know me, then I'm going to work harder for you. I feel a connection to school. And I'm going to draw a connection to the Portrait of a Graduate at this point as well, because sometimes when we see someone, it's not that they're getting an A. It's not that they're the top of the class, but they are trying. They are resilient. They are showing character. They are communicating and articulating their need, their challenge in school. And so the portrait allows you to recognize those. And as you're connecting with students and getting to know those students even more deeply, the portrait allows you to recognize beyond their academics and the courses they're taking, the character traits that are important to them, important to you. And the specific areas of focus that were articulated here, and this is the inside baseball language, vertical teaming. But your staff really did say, as they're looking at this theme of belonging and our students and connectedness, they really wanted opportunity to speak with one another about that, with the goal of achieving that.
Right, exactly. And the next one is connections. Our schools, our community. Again, we talked a lot about this idea that, good schools are reflective of a community and attract a community. And they really wanted to also talk about how those neighborhood schools are really ensuring success, whatever neighborhood or zone they're in. And so what you can see here is we didn't label these things because it was a little bit different in terms of the data that we were aggregating, but they really want every school to have high expectations and connectedness to create that pride. They really want all staff, students, and families to be together, really demonstrating that civic responsibility and participation. That came through a lot. That idea that we're creating connections, not just at the school, that's super important, but really we're a neighborhood, we're a community. How are we making sure that that connectedness is there? And that came through from a variety of perspectives in the room. And then ultimately, really building on the successes and the unique identities that these campuses have. I was sharing with Wes, I don't live in Orange County, I live in a different county, and I've been seeing all the great press that you guys have been getting in the last couple of days for a district-wide effort. And so I think that's partly what we were hearing. That kind of thing resonates with your community. They want to see that it's school to school, that there is a success and a connection.
And I would just say, to underscore that as we move into this last category, the people who did participate, who shared their authentic voice, while they had areas that they feel we need to address, maybe addressed more robustly, more honestly, they're also very proud of the district. I also want to not lose the opportunity to say how clearly connected this board as a body and as individual trustees is to the community that you serve. The direction you gave us when we first met and the themes you touched on are the themes that came out of these voices. And so truly, you are very connected to what's being said out there, what you're hearing, praise and need. And so that's really nice to know that you are fulfilling that legal responsibility of community voice. Resources is really, the conversation was, if these are our priorities, academics, making sure students feel they belong, building strong school communities, we just want to know that you as an organization are looking at all of these resources and then some, but these were the specifics that were listed by your community, asking the question, are they aligned to the priorities we've outlined here? So you don't see an action plan necessarily around academics, technology, lifelong learning, civic responsibility. They just would like you as a policy body to be asking the questions, are we aligning these in accordance with those large key priority areas of focus? And we did not hear that you aren't. They just want to make sure that, again, as Sandy said, you can do, I think it was our CBO who used to say to me, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. And so are we aligning, as a busy mother, I often felt that way myself. So are we aligning our resources toward those critical priorities that you have mapped out? And that really concludes our portion of the presentation. It is now time for discussion with the board to identify anything that you feel might be missing, and to, with your staff, map out the timeline for your next steps. You do have a timeline with the desire to have this completed by summer, but I will tell you that's a self-created timeline. It's yours to own. If you need more time, if you want more time, if there need to be more steps, that's your privilege. Isn't that right, Superintendent Smith?
Absolutely.
I didn't want to overstep there. I lost eye contact for a moment.
It's always their timeline.
Thank you. So I turn it now to the president.
Great, thank you so much for your presentation. Before we open it up to our comments and our discussion, I wanted to take a moment and hear from staff first about, are there any current elements that you have that might be currently underway in any of these four areas?
Yeah, so President Osoilu asked us to be prepared to kind of share, because we know that people are going to be saying, yeah, the vision looks good, but what about this one thing? Or what about the things that you're excited about working on, those strategic actions? And so we wanted to give you a flavor for, the things we've been thinking about, but only thinking about, because it would be premature for us to plan for something you hadn't identified as a vision. it would be disrespectful. So we're prepared, depending on where you land, to start working with stakeholders to co-develop these strategic actions. But we thought we would share with you some of the things we're thinking about in each of these buckets. I just want to make sure that my teams, we shared this earlier, but we want to give the board as much time as they need. So just kind of briefly hit on these things. And everything they'll share is something that could and will be measured. There'll be a timeline, a measurement, and an expected outcome. So really smart, goal applicable, right? So with academics, let's do the PLT and continuing the PLT. And Carrie, let's have you and Kurt speak to that. So Carrie first and then Kurt, or however you want to do it. But let's have you guys do that one.
I'm sure I'll introduce the conversation around professional learning teams. This is work that we have been engaged in for the last 2 years, and we as a team have decided with the research that one of the best mechanisms for school improvement and school transformation is through highly effective teacher collaboration. And we have established that as our PLT process. And so one of the great areas that we've been able to gain momentum in is bringing these teachers together and being able to provide opportunities of time and collegiality and collaboration to come together to really talk about student data and really look at how in what ways we can inform adult changes in adult behavior to really drive changes at the school. So I'll let Dr. Sir talk a little bit more deeply about metrics, how we measure that, and what our expectations are.
Yeah, so we are excited going into next year and thinking about the way that we're going to be structuring our PLT time. We know we have 75 minutes on a weekly basis for our teams to collaborate and support one another. And with that, at the elementary level specifically, shifting from a model where maybe one Wednesday you have professional development, the next Wednesday you have PLT work with data analysis, the next Wednesday you have professional development. We're going to shift that model moving into next year to where every single Wednesday, every single week, we're looking at a set of data. We're working and supporting teachers in regards to future planning for instruction that's coming up, looking at intervention models to support our students. So we're really excited about framing our PLTs in a stronger way that will really build that muscle, if you will, in regards to data analysis, collaboration, and understanding where it is that our students are. And specifically, one of the things that we're highly interested in and we're able to use our data to analyze it is the growth that is occurring in our schools. And when teachers have sets of data and we can share with them some of our analyses in regards to the amount of growth that is occurring, it gives an opportunity for us to identify great things that are happening in particular teams and really magnify that and communicate it out so that when teachers are doing incredible things with students and the growth is very clear, that can be a wonderful thing to put a huge spotlight on and share with other people, because teachers collaborating with one another is really where the work is going to go in regards to making strong academic progress as a school district. We know that it all comes through our teachers. So being able to identify where is growth occurring, what do those supports look like, and how is it that we can take advantage of that so that everyone can see particular things that are happening is wonderful. But it really comes down at the end of the day, because at every school you have pockets of excellence and things where support is needed. So it's not just about identifying the areas where excellent things are happening, but it's also about clearly identifying areas where we can support and help move the whole system forward. So it's not about just taking things that are working and moving them forward. It's about looking at the whole big picture, all of your grade level teams, all of the work people are doing, and moving it collectively by analyzing the data, understanding the growth that is or isn't occurring, and being able to make shifts so that we're moving student learning forward in all of our classes and all of our programs. But to Dr. Smith's point, it really comes down to being able to understand what it is that is occurring when our students are making academic progress and having that data clear and visible and understanding where it's working and where we need to support. So we're excited to be able to pinpoint specifically where growth is needed and highlight and pinpoint where outstanding academic progress is being made.
Yeah, so for the team, that's a burrito response, just so we're clear to kind of set the standard. Because they mentioned we don't call out in the plan specific subgroups, I want to give you another example in this bucket, though. Sarah, your work that you're looking at around the Learning Center model, just briefly, how that would fit into this bucket.
Briefly or Kurt briefly?
Briefly.
Okay. Yes. So we know that students with disability, research shows that they do best the closest they are to grade level academic rigor. And one of the things that we want to do is look, especially at secondary, of removing basic skills. Students who just go to a class for homework help, some of those things, and replace it. We want to do that starting at Costa Mesa, and have a learning center where any student can go. Any student, general ed, special ed, 504 can go and get that help and really track our data on how students are performing who have that as their academic support.
Thank you. In the bucket of belonging, we're already looking at groups that we can work with, like the Search Institute, to do asset mindset development in the district, beginning with staff. So the first year would be, how do we train staff to be asset minded and intentionally build those? And they have programs then that we take to schools, or mindset shifts that we take to schools that can be measured. And this is the important part, because they're surveying they can do about asset development. Where do students feel like they are seen more, heard more, safer after these interventions? And of course, we would bring all these things to you so you could look at them and say, are these surveys appropriate, whatever. But to really quantify how the students are progressing in this feeling of being seen, supported, and safe. So that's one thing we're working on there. Kurt also mentioned the PLT. These innovations can hit on more than one bucket. He also mentioned that we could put in there and should put in our PLTs metrics around how students are feeling seen, heard, supported. So as teachers are looking at their academics, they're also looking at, but are these students feeling like they belong? Do they feel more connected? And what can we do for interventions if they are not? So again, these strategic actions can hit on more than one bucket. Socorro had one on connections I wanted her to share that I think gets to that part of how do we connect families and the community to schools, which then drives pride in that school when you have more people participating and coming together to support it. So Socorro.
Thank you. What we are thinking about, and what we've always been thinking about, but now really having the voices from others and ideas from others, is thinking about family and community experiences, how we create positive experiences for everyone to connect to each other and to school and to our community, both the large and small ones we have. We have a school community, but then we have a city community, and then we have two cities communities. I mean, there are just a lot of things to belong to in Newport-Mesa, and how we do that through experiences, training, developing leadership. All of those are part of connecting us as a community.
Yeah, thank you. Finally, with resources, we heard today about the parental concerns, community concerns about the disparity of raising funds. I've heard it from some of you, in fact, and one of the things we've talked about that the parents on the task force group brought up as well was looking at this idea of a district-wide foundation, which wouldn't take the place of the existing foundations. They can do their thing. What we would do is a thing district-wide that would allow us to offset some of the expenses at all sites. So all of us would work together to help all the sites. There's a power in that that we've only begun to explore, and other districts have done it to great success. So we want to really lean into that's work that's already started, and we think that this would really address some of those concerns and this bucket. But also there are issues, and Jeff had several about dashboards. How do we, with facilities and safety, have dashboards that you and the community could look at to see where are the priorities, who's up next, when am I up, all those kinds of things you get asked all the time. Instead of asking you, they can look at a dashboard and then talk to you about something else, and it will be based on metrics.
Do you want us to send them to the internet?
What's that? Well, or you can read it to them in your coffee talks, whatever. But the point is that there would be these resources that Jeff would produce in a bunch of different areas around facilities, around safety, et cetera. But the one, Trace, I wanted you to hit on last and turn it over to the board is with that idea of position control and how that helps with resource alignment. Because I think that is so necessary for us. So go ahead.
It will be a key. So one example of an actionable item under that would be to prioritize multi-divisional work to standardize the position control process. That would ultimately improve our accuracy, our cross-departmental communication, and fiscal accountability around all of our staffing decisions. So that'd be an example of an actionable item.
So again, these are just ideas, things that we've started to begin to work on. We know that we have to work with the community. We have to take into account where you land and what your priorities are that we've heard and that you expressed. But those are just some ideas for your question.
Great. And with that, we'll open it up to any feedback, comments from the board.
Is it for just this section for now?
Anything that was presented. Trustee Murphy, then Trustee Wygant.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Okay, Tracy, what did you just say?
I know. Really good question. So an example would be to bring our divisions together to work on a process that really incorporates multi-divisional collaboration around staffing decisions. Because ultimately that's where most of our fiscal resources are given. And so that is one of the examples that should this be the strategic plan would be something that we could put as an action item to prioritize that work.
Okay, give me an example.
An example would be when creating a new position, for example, what process that goes through in order to, all the way from creation, all the way through to approval, posting, and filling. Really prioritizing that work that happens behind the scenes and in between to ensure that our fiscal resources are being allocated in the way that supports the ultimately the vision that's being set forth. Does that help?
Kind of.
Okay.
I think I'll still need to see that in action.
So will I.
More on the actions later.
Okay. And then, of course, the facilities website, the webpage. So what is this going to look like?
To be determined, but one of the big things that we heard coming out of that resource section was the alignment and the importance of aligning our resources. Well, you can only know if you're aligning them properly if you can account for that. And how do you see that? Unfortunately, school district budget is not easy to read for the layman. And so when we think about dashboards, those are really easy. So when you look at like a site-based budget, can our school sites access a dashboard and see how much they've spent or how much they have available in certain categoricals? We don't have that yet, but that's an idea. Same thing with facilities. We have projects. You can track how much we've spent on the project up to that point. So these are just examples, and the technology exists, so it's certainly something we want to explore.
In terms of explore, do you mean like we could do that soon?
Let me answer that one. Two things for you to think about. We're here all night, so we'll answer questions. We'll tell you all the fun ideas we have. I just would encourage the board to really focus on the vision part of it, because that's the time you really have to inform this so that we can adopt it at some point. But I would say, and I should have said this earlier, so thank you. Next year is our time to develop the strategic actions. We can't develop them all over the summer. That would be also disingenuous. The public would say, sure, you are waiting for your board to decide. True. And we are. There are some things we can do sooner than others, though. And I think dashboards like that are something we can turn around within the year, right? So I really think next year as we look at dashboards for, based on a certain metric, right, that we disclose publicly, here is the order, here is the cost, and you can track updates for both. And it would be a landing spot for that. And again, these are just ideas that we have to just share with you examples of what the action strategies will look like.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Great. Awesome. Don't think I'll not agree with you moving forward with that on any level. Okay, so Kurt, one little question was how would you track data on feeling connected?
Absolutely. So we have a number of different assessments that are available. I'll give you one example. We have STAR reading that is done 4 times a year, starting in 2nd grade up through the high school levels. Those assessments are we are able to measure and quantify how much growth has occurred between different points, beginning of year to end of year, beginning of year to middle of year. And one of the things we've been doing is working with Doug Fisher and specifically looking at schools that are trajectory changing schools that make 1.3 years worth of growth in a given year. And so by analyzing the growth that is occurring throughout the year, we won't have to wait till the end of the year for state results to come in and be able to understand.
Kurt, I think hers is about
I thank you for that.
connectedness.
Yeah.
But you guys talked about how would we track students feeling connected?
So there's a survey that I mentioned that we could do. And also, so that you know, because this is a great question, how do you measure soft skills? How do you measure the human skills? And in most of the school districts around the state, they've never been able to do that. We've been investigating technology right now where you can measure using AI and video, and it's not high cost, the human skills in students over time, and it is statistically really, really accurate. So the surveys I've mentioned about the Search Institute, that's an easy one. That's been done in lots of districts. And now we're looking at emerging technologies that allow students to interact with an agent, right? A virtual agent that then analyzes how they're doing and spits it out for teachers in real time.
Okay.
It's
But just doesn't
amazing.
become their best friend, right?
No, it's not that kind of agent.
Okay. But thank you, Kurt. Thank you. That was, I appreciate that. Then, so in terms of all that data, so this is just a logistics question. How are you going to give that to every group of teachers every week? From
I think
every different school, every different class?
Well, we've been developing that for this year, but to Wes's point about really developing the actions and how we're going to measure it, and Jeff's point, how we're going to make dashboards for teachers, for parents, for students themselves, that is part of the rich discussion for next year.
Yeah.
But there are tools out there.
But we're going to be able to give each teacher, PLC group, every week
They have it now.
data that what happened in this last week.
Well, and one thing I think, and Wes
are they looking at that every week?
reminded
Is
a
that
lot
what's-
of groups, it's not just a test. There is test data, but there's also other data in a classroom.
Yeah.
And it can be the writing from that day. It can be a sample that the teacher did on the board. It can be a lot of things. Data is a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's not just SBAC. It's not just grades. And so developing that out and ways to, the key is that they agree on what that is and they all bring it and talk about it. But that is kind of how we would develop that out and making sure teachers know that, have access to it. And when we can, we're using AI and other tools to make data very visible to a lot of people.
May I jump in? I have a,
Oh, no.
because it's on the same subject, because I can wait my turn, but that one's relevant to what Trustee Murphy is. So where does the California Health Youth Survey fall into all this? Because isn't that part of that whole
That absolutely
effective?
would be part of the data.
Because
We
I know
use
it's
that
limited to
now.
certain grades, but is it kind of the same model of questioning?
Well, and you can see it over time. You can see change over time. You can look at specific questions and domains. So that absolutely would be one of our data sources, but not the only. We would seek to develop more.
Thank you.
And to just follow up on all of that, there's other tested tools that measure these different attributes that a student feels or perceives over time. And so Healthy Kids measures some of them, but there's a bunch of other tools that measure all the other elements that they're talking about. It's just a matter of, I think to their point, getting clarity around the staff and which one the team wants to use. Because someone's going to love one question and someone's going to hate one question. And they're going to have to compile a tool that meets everybody's needs and then just use that tool regularly, maybe monthly, maybe quarterly, just depending. So were there any more questions before we go to Trustee Wygand?
No,
Was
Trustee
next?
Wygand.
So I wanted to kind of go into this document, A Portrait of Graduate, that you have put together. I don't know if we were going to go through it and wordsmith it or just provide you feedback. I don't know how this document, I guess, is going to be fully used. But one thing that I have about, so my comments are really about things that are in this document. Our commitments to all students. So on these two paragraphs up there, I was, listening to you talk about how great our students are and what they want and what they need, but I don't really see that so much in these two paragraphs. Yes, they want to feel a strong sense of belonging and being that cultivated, but I don't think anyone really talked about that I want my school to be rooted in empathy and kindness. I think they were talking about, you said our students are focused and strong. I would like these two sentences to be a bit stronger about what we are for our kids. You explained a lot, or said a lot, adult ready. I mean, if our commitment to our students is that they're going to come out focused and strong and adult ready, that they will be, you even said, open, vocal, and honest, lead and reflect, like those types of strong characteristics of our students, to me, is a better reflection of what we want our students to become, not that they're kind and empathy. Of course we want that. However, speaking as a parent, that is somewhat overdone where we're like, yeah, but you know what? Johnny over here just bullied my kid and I want my kid to stand up to that kid, right? Like there's those types of things where it's not, I don't want him to be kind to that guy. I want him to be like, look, that's wrong. You shouldn't do this. And so instead of being bystanders, I think I've talked to Wes about being upstanders, you know, have a sense, and there's a lot of discussion about civic responsibility and connectiveness. Speak up in your community, volunteer in your community, be a part, find a voice, find what makes you tick. That whole idea of asset mindset. Like, I maybe am never going to be great at physiology, but you know what? I might be great at something else, and that's my asset. And so I would like those to represent a little bit more of a vision of that character of that student that we want. So that's my take on those top two. The other things
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
that? So that, because this is really that time for you as a board to wordsmith this, if you will. I mean, I wouldn't say wordsmith, but to your point, what's missing? So just for clarity's sake, are you saying that the strength and some of those things need to be in that second paragraph? But just so we're clear, so that then you can respond, these 6 items that they mentioned as the portrait of a graduate, those have been highly vetted through the groups and through you. So when you give that feedback, are you talking about the second paragraph or the 6 or both? Because that's
yeah, the first thing that I just said now, the top two, the mission statement.
It is a mission statement.
And I guess,
Our commitment to all students is what I'm
and
talking
I
about.
guess our question is this going to be on our website? Is this what we're going to be going on for the next 10 years? Yeah, so I agree with Krista, 5 years. When I read those first 2 paragraphs, I almost wanted to stop. I mean, I was like, this isn't us. This is not Newport-Mesa Unified School District. I almost wanted to stop reading it, but then as I went down, I saw how wonderful. I mean, I don't want to. It's not my turn, right?
Yeah, no, you're right on because I don't even bother reading the top 2 like statements of things. I go right into the big beaten paragraphs because I find them fluff, and so I would like this not to be fluff, and I find that to be fluff at the moment. Sorry to be so critical, but I've come from a long day of work.
But I
I'm
think
direct.
once, I'm glad I did keep reading because the key areas of focus
Yes.
were fantastic. I mean, that was
Right.
fantastic. When you started getting into the technology, the critical thinking, the AI literacy, and I see this happening in our district already. I see you guys planning. Like I thought when you guys were going to speak, you were going to tell us, well, hey, we just did Ignite. I mean, that's all of it. I mean, you've already started doing this stuff. So that's amazing to me. And that was what I got excited about. But yeah, if this is what we're going to send to our parents, I mean, I think that needs to be exactly what
needs to
Krista was
be
right on with that, with those adjectives and those words, and use those strong words.
I think if a parent read that, they'd be like, "Oh God, not again!" Like, what? Like, come on, what am my kids? Like, are they going to come out being like not adult ready? Right? Like,
But I love the connection. I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful to the connection because we've heard that from the students. We know that they want to connect. We know that's important. I mean, we know that, and it is important. But we don't want to substitute that for rigor and for getting our kids jobs. Later on.
Agreed. And I did not talk to Lisa about this earlier, so
I know.
we are not commenting, but thank you. So that's really like in that first paragraph, it just needs to be stronger. And I think it needs to define what we want our kids to turn out as. And then these other ones, I just have a couple comments, I think, on the tech navigators. I think there's a big push in our district to figure out the proper use of technology for all grades. And I know that we were talking about this last meeting as well. But I hear it a lot from parents is, do we need our kindergartners and our first and second graders? And I just have, this is an anecdotal experience I've had, is that like I travel to China for work and I talk to my colleagues about what their kids learn in school. And in China, they're doing so much technology in their classes. Those kids don't even write. They communicate to their phone or their computers and they dictate to it. So they don't actually do pen to paper anymore. And that's gonna, the fact that we can be more creative with pen and paper, that's gonna take us and lead us more than it is going to be using technology, because everyone can do that, right? But can everyone create something themselves? We gotta be able to use AI, obviously, as a tool. But what's gonna separate us from being successful or not is having that creative thought, that creative mind. So I would like to see tech used in a responsible way and in a creative way. And then one more thing on I don't know if this goes into, I'm not sure where this goes into, but, rigorous academic standards, like, is this something that we talk about, hey, we make every kid have, to do A through G, have an A through G requirement for our high school students? Do we require then each student to take one CTE class? And then there's this whole idea of the civic mindedness that we have of a connection and get people involved in our zones or the elementary schools. Volunteer hours. I remember in college, we had to, I went to USC, fight on, and we had to, one of our classes, every student, every freshman in an English class had to go and do volunteer hours at a local elementary school in downtown LA. And that was something that got kids to actually want to be teachers, or they understood someplace different or a different aspect of education or just community that they weren't a part of. And so I would love to see if that's something that we could have as well, that we would have to volunteer in our classrooms. But I would also like to see volunteer hours as a graduation requirement as well. I think that's part of civic mindedness. Those are all, I've got a lot, but that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are great. And in following up with that, if I could make a couple of edit elements for the F3 team in response to that. So for instance, Trustee Wigan, I heard the word focused and strong, that you wanted to hear that. Under confident, focused and strong should probably come out stronger in there. And then the open, vocal, and honest, you have a space for communicators down below. In the communicators, it should probably reference the open, vocal, and honest. But in this very first intro paragraph situation, it sounds like folks would like that sentence, the we foster schools rooted in empathy, and kind of let that go, but begin with we want to foster, adult-ready upstanders that can care for one another, cultivate a sense of belonging, and then have the resources to do so. Kind of situation. Does that get at what you were alluding to, Trustee Wigand? Getting the top paragraph a little stronger, but then some of those words particularly.
Yeah, I mean, I
sections
think,
below.
yeah, wordsmith it so it doesn't just talk about feelings. I'd like it to talk about,
Substance.
like what we're really trying to treat.
One thing, and I think all of it can be incorporated, and it's your call ultimately. The one word in there we got the most feedback on from our constituents, and it wasn't close, was empathy. That wasn't in there or wasn't in there enough. So however you would accept integrating that, I just share that because that came up in writing and in the advisory groups quite a bit. Just
Yeah, no, I mean, that's an amazing word, and that's definitely where, I want our children to be. But could there be something where it's great to be empathy, but what are you going to do with it?
yeah,
Like integrity or standing up or something.
yeah.
And maybe it's a matter of going through each of the 6 bullets and drawing out one keyword from each of it, because you have empathy down there under collaborators.
Yeah.
So it's like you have these words in the mix, but they're not coming through as strong in the intro paragraph. And it could sound like more active voice of how these 6 things will get developed, but up front at the top would probably help that. And I do think under the Tech Navigator one that you mentioned, again, you have language in the rigor and relevance page that you call the technology use confident, ethical, creatively use technology. But then on this page, you have confidently, responsibly, maybe moving the ethically, creatively into that first page too. So however you describe the tech, whenever you mention AI, you mention those three adjectives, the same across each page of the document. And then something in there to Trustee Wygand's point about the tech being age appropriate. So like, yeah, the kindergartners don't need their Chromebook. So how do we like convey that everyone shouldn't be doing tech all the time? So something age appropriateness with tech. But next we had Trustee Pearson. Did you have more before? Before I
Well,
move
I guess I do have one more question, I guess, for Kurt. When we talk about the PCL groups or whatever, it's a 75 minutes a week, you said?
Yes.
For the teachers doing the data and stuff. Do they also, during that time, do they get the time to talk about Odyssey of the Mind and how, you know, to do this, the stuff with the kids? Do they get that time in there, or is that just all data-driven?
Odyssey of the Mind is one of the areas that we're working on with the innovation work, and that is done by point people, sometimes during the day, sometimes after school. But to answer your question, I wouldn't say necessarily Odyssey of the Mind is a point of discussion during PLT work, but I would say that how are we going to challenge students who have mastered the content that we are looking at as a next step?
Going.
Definitely, that's part of the
Because
discussion.
I sat through a meeting with all the principals, and Anderson brought up, you know, the next new math Olympiad or whatever, and I know they're really want to push this math Olympiad, and I could just see all the faces in the room going, oh my gosh, you know, what teacher is going to step up to do this for us? Or like maybe if they had time during that time. Like, I mean, because I think that's, I mean, when you see the pictures of that Ignite night, I mean, and Battle of the Books, like that stuff, I mean, that's really taking this next step and the next level and doing what this is saying. So I just want to know where that time is going to come from.
PLT time is adults. Kids have already been dismissed.
Right.
But there are times in the elementary
They can
structure
plan.
where students get what they need. It's called win time, what I need. And there are places where we could embed acceleration and those types of things. And that's what we've been starting to do. And along with the training for GATE and the GATE icons, making sure that those are all visible across the district when students have time with teachers.
I would just add, yes, and that is appropriate in a PLT for them to talk about where students can be advanced in their learning. And teachers also, we don't just talk about remediation in a PLT. We talk about what every student needs in our care, and if they need advanced coursework or challenges, then that could be a conversation we have there.
So just noting the time for everyone, we have about half hour left. Can I next go to Trustee Crane, then Anderson, then McElroy?
I think Anderson.
Was it first? Okay,
Yeah.
I can't, they're all just lit up,
Yeah,
sorry.
I know how that goes.
Anderson,
Been there.
Crane, McElroy.
Thank you. I agree with Trustee Wygand. I really like, and I think it includes under the Tech Navigator part, we have responsible there twice, or once, and confidently twice, but I agree with the creative piece. One thing that I would like to add, not necessarily as a portrait of this, but perhaps for this, something for the staff to create that I think would help with the engagement and for us certainly to be able to explain, is early childhood expectations. So I don't know with our continuum, here's what a TK student is expected or exposed to. Here's what a first grade student is expected. I think we know in places like Finland, they don't introduce technology at all until first grade. And so there's just there's a lot of different approaches, and I don't know that any of us know what our district is currently doing. And I know that's a question that I get often. So something like that I think would be really helpful from the beginning stages. I've been hearing a lot more from parents about, I'm starting my child in preschool with your district now. What does that look like? What will it look like in the next few years? Whereas before we were talking about kindergarten and what does that look like in those next few years? And I like what Trustee Ursulou said about the age appropriateness piece. I do agree. What I saw and I heard from the dots on the boards and from a lot of the conversations that we had was that focus, like Superintendent Smith said, about empathy. One thing that I think could be helpful is to flip the order of this. And so to have, this is portrait of a graduate, and again, this is just, like that, it's not a visual necessarily, but to flip it so the top piece is this first line with the top it says, our graduates are self-confident and forward-thinking, and then goes into the items. And then at the bottom is our district commitment to students. And so I think all the students that I have worked with all speak about that first paragraph. I think we heard over and over about empathy. We've been doing a lot of work on kindness. I think the soft skills are something that we hear repeatedly. So I'm less inclined to lose those. I think it's an and situation, not an or. And I think one of the things that I would like to see under that included too would be about our commitment to students is related to opportunities. I think we in our area should be and could be turning out amazing graduates. And so I think as part of our commitment to all students, we should be raising the bar for everyone. It should be, if you graduate from any of our campuses, they have amazing opportunities that are unique and expansive. And so I think that too has a place in there that's maybe not as itemized by the 8 or so items. And then for me, the thing that I think also could be helpful as we're putting this together, and again, these are just kind of based, I think, from the dashboard and then a bit of what Superintendent Smith shared. I was just at Love Costa Mesa Day at Wilson Elementary, and one of the teachers was like, I think we were supposed to get new asphalt, but now we're not getting it. But so I think having a dashboard for everyone will stop the bottleneck of everything having to go through the principal to get that information. That also got me thinking about how we do funding. So when there's new PTA people coming in, when there are just people who are looking at our schools, most people have no idea what a basic aid district is. No one really knows unless you have a decision one day to spend a couple of hours to dive into how school finance. And so, but it continues to come up more and more for our district. And I think it really is a subsequent piece to what we did with the facilities master plan. And so I think it could be helpful in addressing the fundraising gap is, what is our fundraising gap? So do we have one? What does that look like? Is that based on federal funding? Is that from property tax? What does that look like differently with private foundations versus, it sounds like possibly going the route of a community foundation that's holistic and would probably have parent voice in it and our business leaders. So I think, but we would need to start somewhere foundational to get to that. And so I think that would be really helpful. And yeah, I think the Learning Center model sounds great. It sounds similar to what you guys have at Corona Del Mar High School with your Learning Center that I know has been like an amazing resource there. So yeah, lots of interesting pieces to that. Thank you.
All right, Trustee Crane next, and then Trustee McElroy.
Just a couple of comments or questions. So these first two paragraphs, are they a mission statement? How would you portray those two? Are they supposed to be?
A promise, a preface to the actual description.
So preface, okay. Board, I don't know how you feel about perhaps inserting the word in the first sentence. We believe that when students are truly known, are truly known as individuals and feel as a strong connection to peers, staff, can we insert the word community? Because I think we're talking about civic mindedness, we're talking about us being greater than just ourselves. How do you feel about the word community being inserted in this?
I don't like the first sentence.
I think the whole thing needs to be redone. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, what about including the word community somehow?
Community can be involved somewhere.
We have it right, I mean, we have it in connections, community.
As a sub? Connections are, okay, that's good, all right. And then my last question is, we're, as far as timeline and trying to meet the timeline, or as a guideline, of course, because timelines are meant to be stretched or not, given the need. Summer should be our own personal goal to iron this out, the language. And then after that, how many years to implement, and then when do we revisit again?
We've talked about with this group a 5-year master plan. That doesn't mean everything takes 5 years, so we would stage it in multiple years for you. I think that timeline makes sense. Again, we're going to need time to develop some of this. Some of this we can do a little sooner. Some will take a lot of community. So it's a yes and probably answer, but it's a 5-year plan in probably 2-year stages so we can implement and monitor.
And then so we revisit, do we focus once again on taking a look at it and see how we're doing every 5 then?
Every year. I mean, annually,
Every year,
we bring these things
annually.
back. We would connect these strategic goals that we've initiated, right? These strategic actions, rather, sorry, to our board meetings. So we'd be publicly sharing how we're doing with these things, how we're tracking. My evaluation annually will be once again linked to whatever those are that we commit to for that time period, like we do now with our big 4. Now we'll put in the ones that we've agreed to. So it'll really be annually and often that we bring these things forward.
And would the model include the same breakdown of the stakeholders that gave feedback, or would that be every 5 or whatever years?
We wouldn't anticipate bringing them back until we do this again. They've helped us inform this. This will then become the board's vision and direction, and then staff will do the strategic actions and then bring that back for your consideration and evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
So Trustee McKellar?
Okay, mine's kind of drills down like maybe farther than we need to go, just like specific examples. But, so I'm gonna first start and say, Krista's right on. The first paragraph either just needs to be eliminated or completely written in a very strong manner of who we are and what we do and what we expect, and you know, just a very strong statement. So parents read the first, if we keep a first paragraph, read and go, wow, this is great, and move on and see all these things. 2 things I want to say. In this draft, it says our efforts will include, and this is our efforts will include. I think that just needs to be wiped out. Just, we're doing this,
Which
you know.
page?
On all these, it says
I see.
leading with care, whatever, you know, our efforts will include. I just think we should wipe that out and just go, we are doing this. And, you know, this is what, you know, this is our plan. Not that we're just kind of giving it an effort. Perhaps we're actually doing it. I wanted to talk about the connection between being seen and heard and everything. And I have firsthand example of, you know, a school making a complete change over, you know, just because of one human being, and that is the Newport L. And I think that what she's doing, the principal, and you might not know, but she is the perfect example of what we need to have every principal and teacher do. And every student wants to impress her because she sits down with each student as a one-on-one. There's 300 and something kids there. She goes and meets with them, goes over their grades, and then they do not want to let her down. So if we can implement maybe where the principal, I know high schools, we got 2,000 kids, but I mean, our principal at Newport Harbor, all the kids fully respect him too, because he makes that effort to get to know and be seen, and somehow how we can implement that. And also with the teachers, I was thinking they spend 75 minutes, you know, going over growth. Well, let's spend 75 minutes. You know, I remember when I was in elementary school, we got a one-on-one field trip. I know this is not today's day, but I got to go horseback riding with my teacher. So I know, but I'm just saying, like, spend that one of those 75 minutes. I know it's not during school time, but figure out a way where, hey, let's go hang out, the teacher and the student. So that student then feels, God, we're friends now, and I want to really impress, you know, him or her, or whomever it is. So I think we have to do a lot more of just that full engagement with the students, not just teaching at them, but teaching with them, you know, and growing with them, and just, you know, just a real a bond versus here's your assignment. So any way we can implement that, and I somehow would like that in this wording. Like if the parents heard, if they're going to read this, like, you know, we're going to, you know, have this one-on-one with your child. I don't know how to do this, but would be my dream. I think that it would really be like, hey, yeah, great idea. So that's just my feedback. I appreciate all the hard work. I mean, there's a lot of great things in this for sure. I just think we need to make it stronger and more on tact. And one other thing is, under confidence or whatever our headings might be, I want to really tell kids to follow their passion at whatever age. Like, and my daughter's an example. I'm sorry. She's followed her passions. She knew what her passion was. I never knew what mine was. And, if you let them follow their passion, they really succeed. And I just think we should write that somewhere. We thrive on having children follow their passion.
I think that's good feedback. And just to be clear, because I don't want the labor groups or HR to freak out over you just changing our PLT negotiated language. But what you said, in all seriousness, is really creating those connections between adults and students. And I appreciate what you said about principals. It's true. And that's why we're going to begin, if we go in this direction. Again, this is all dependent upon where you land, with training the leaders first, so that every leader is trained in then how do we do that on our side? And it absolutely includes not just teachers, but classified as well. How does every adult intentionally create those kinds of relationships that develop these assets for our youth, all of them? So 100%, not during PLT time, but we'll figure out these other ways to build that, all of us together. Yeah.
And a way to prove if we did that or not is the Healthy Kids Survey has 2 questions on that. So it will then dictate if we're actually doing it or not. So this is great. We have about 14 minutes left of conversation. Is there anything in the document that anyone else wants to flag or wants to raise before we adjourn? Anything else? Any other final thoughts? Trustee Crane?
Yeah, so we're going to end up aligning our mission statement to this, right? Somehow, I mean, because we do have a mission statement on our website.
Yeah,
I'm assuming it's all going to line up. That's part of the process.
I would say that whatever we have now isn't what we'll have in the future.
Okay.
And we don't have to be constrained by the old mores like mission, vision.
Right.
It gets confusing to people. And so we wrestled with our commitment is, kind
Okay.
of like you're saying, we're not going to try this. This is what we're going to do. But if the board would choose another word, that's fine. But this really replaces all of that.
Okay, that's good to know.
Whatever we call our preface, our preamble, our commitment, our whatever it is, this is what we're going to do. And this is how it's going to look.
Okay, helpful. Thank you.
Anything else before we adjourn?
Just one small item on the belonging page on the bottom. It has specific areas of focus will include professional learning and vertical teaming for staff to ensure subject matter collaboration. I think those sound very similar, and so I think it would be helpful to maybe, if they're included, at the bottom of belonging.
Third page to the back.
Okay, got it, yep.
Second page back.
Okay.
They seem similar. I mean, professional learning is just sort of vague, but then it also falls into vertical teaming for staff. So maybe some more articulation around that I think could be helpful to clarify. That, thank you. But I like where it has this specific areas of focus. I think for each of those are clarifying for people, particularly the community who will be working and reviewing this. So I like under the next one for connections, specific areas of focus.
We can barely hear you, so I'm
Oh,
Okay. Say that again, Board Member Anderson.
Did you hear what I said
I
about
did the first part,
this
yes.
part? Just the other pieces that have, for me, I think it's helpful when it's going back to community and they're reviewing it, where it has what the specific areas of focus will include. I don't know that it needs to be on the final document, but I think it's helpful in the still draft version.
And so that's a good point for us to discuss, because we put these on because they came up through the community, but really these could be the action steps, and we could just leave that off. These would be the things that they would consider as they derive those action steps. I don't know if that's a better way forward.
Absolutely. And I would just say, if I understood, really, this isn't going back to other groups for draft now. This is now with you, however long it takes, to finalize that, so that we can start the work of actually planning those steps and bringing folks together.
Okay, so the specific areas for belonging are just gonna be included then.
Yeah, yep.
Thank you.
And that makes sense because it seems like the other 4 isn't that specific areas of focus at all. So it's
It's a
cleaner
one-off,
if
it
you
seems,
just-
yeah.
Clean it up.
Thank you.
All right, good point. 10 minutes left, anything else? Trustee Craig?
Yes, I have a question. What is our plan to maintain the engagement of these original stakeholders? Is the intent to give them a draft of what we've done tonight, or are we still going to keep them on board and engaged to follow through with, so they feel like their work has been acknowledged and received?
Yeah, well, so yes, we invited them to this so that they knew that they could come to public or they can watch on YouTube and see their work being, kind of digested and considered by the board. Once the board adopts this, we'll share that with them for sure, and then we'll update the community about our strategic progress for the next 5 years and keep these things in front of them and how we're doing so that they see those efforts and can even come back to the board and say, yeah, we said that, and this is what you did. We kind of were looking for this. And then they'll inform the process throughout in our public meetings.
Well, I'd like to extend my gratitude to all those who put in the time, the feedback, and also the courage, especially our student voices, as you reported. I think it's very valuable, so thank you.
And Trustee Murphy?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted, just in listening to everyone, my colleagues, and I appreciate all of their comments about the wording. I usually probably get hung up on the executions. I'm fine. I'm really fine with the wording. But what I did hear is this commitment to all students. This is a statement to this, essentially to the students, and making them feel heard. It is not in like district-wide, like as a district we are this, as an organization we are this. It's not like our mission statement, but this is a statement specifically addressing what the students said was their number one priority. So I don't want to necessarily see this lost, but it doesn't need to be first. I think what the concern is that, to everyone's point, you read the first couple of, the first couple of statements, and then it's like, oh, okay.
And I do think we were coming off, that all that input, and that was really where they were coming from.
We hear it, I've heard it, we've
Yep.
all heard it from our students and certainly our families who have come back and said to us exactly
Yep.
what Trustee McElroy was saying. I had this connection with this,
Yep.
with this principal or this teacher, and it like saved my life.
Right.
And that's all about, building those relationships and being empathetic to the students' needs, right?
Right.
So anyways, however, I don't want to lose that statement. It just probably doesn't need to be first. It just maybe can't be first. And we have to come up with something that's a little bit more about, as a district as a whole, all of our goals, if you will, our mission as a whole, but then certainly this is our commitment to our students.
Yeah, one of the things we've talked about with that is these aren't just our expectations for students. To your point, these are adult and system expectations. So that has to be clear also.
But we can say as adults, we want to make sure that we are developing, we're creating adults. We're developing adults who are going to be, able to, work in our communities and be,
And I think we can do the both and.
whatever.
I really do. I think,
But-
because I think that the input we got around the kind of strong language, really making sure that it's
Yes.
woven through what those attributes are, personal, interpersonal, cognitive. We will pull out that strong language. I think we should take a stab at it, and here's what I would suggest, because I agree with you. I think we can reframe that into sort of a promise from the board, because what I'm hearing you all say is you want something that really sets the stage very
Sets the tone of the
strongly and
district,
sets the tone, right? This really was a commitment, to your point, around that connection with the students and hearing what but it really does come across, I think, in the elements of the portrait of a graduate. So let us take a stab. give you a couple of options that you could play around with and then think where you want it to be used. Because to Dr. Smith's point, ultimately, most districts are moving away from the old vision, mission, kind of static, bureaucratic language and moving to something, and, with the strong language, really commitment. This is who we are in Newport-Mesa. This is what we're doing for all our students. And so I think we can do that. You gave us really good feedback for that.
One
And then
more
we'll
thing.
work with Dr. Smith on a timeline for that.
I mean, basically, we want to give them the tools to succeed. And that's about it. I mean, right? That's how I would phrase it.
All right. With that, if no further comments, then we can conclude and adjourn at 4:25. And thank you so much to the F3 team.